talk about their experience with crowdsourcing. We'll take a quick coffee break and let you interact and network with your different colleagues and all the customers and prospects that we have here. And then we'll wrap up the day with a very dynamic panel after lunch that is promising to be exciting and invigorating. So before we get started with our opening address, let me cover a few housekeeping items. Who has a Twitter account? This is the part where I make a joke about the president and Twitter, but I don't want to be in trouble with HR, so we'll bypass that. But if you have a Twitter account, we would love for you to hashtag Innovation Summit and tag Topcoder in all of your tweets. Now, how many has a Twitter account? Show of hands. The person with the most retweeted tweet and or liked tweet, we have a $100 Amazon gift card for you. So tweet away. Be sure once again to tag Topcoder and hashtag InnoSummit18. Restrooms are located outside to the right. And if you have a cell phone, which most of us do, please keep it on silent mode. During the Q&A portion after presentations, there will be microphones, and we ask that if you have a question, make sure you wait until a microphone is with you. That way our live streaming audience can hear the question. So to everyone who's streaming live from all over the globe, everyone turn around and look at the camera in the back. Say good morning. Give them a wave. All right. Big shout out to Banu from Wipro, who's streaming with us live, and his team. And the only thing that we ask on a final note is that if you have a laptop and you have to get work done, we ask that you respectfully move to the lobby to do that and not be a distraction to your neighbors who are here with us today. We have one exception to that rule, and that is if you're signing a $10 million deal with Topcoder and need to get it done today, you open up that laptop and go to town. We'd love that. So once again, we're thrilled you could join us with Topcoder and Wipro and all of our incredible speakers. And we are just extremely grateful to have our first speaker here today. I had the opportunity to meet him when we got acquired in November, maybe 2 years ago. And I always like telling this story. There was a big HP event going on in London, and the request was for our CEO, Mike Forrest, to go. He was like, well, I can't go to this event. You know, Wipro had just acquired us. And I remember getting there, and the GCP for Wipro said, hey, there's a dinner tonight with a bid. And I was just like, really? And I texted Mike and said, hey, what am I supposed to do or say to him? He was like, he's really there. I was like, he is, and I get to meet him before you. So it was an exciting opportunity where we got to meet a bid, but I can truly say that he is the biggest fan and seller of Topcoder. So please help me welcome to the stage the president and CEO of Wipro Limited and the executive director, Abid. Hi, thanks.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Wipro Innovation Summit and the Topcoder Open event that is going on a few miles here at a ranch in Texas. And I know some of you were there last night, so thank you for being there last night, and sorry for the guys who missed it. It was real fun. It was Texas at a ranch last night. So did you guys who were there have fun? Wow, and wasn't it amazing seeing the Topcoder contest live? You know, contestants from all over the world. I was amazed at seeing all the flags that were displayed over there. It does give a very real sense of the reach of Topcoder to over 100 countries, 1.4 billion designers, developers, data scientists on Topcoder. You know, so many CEOs I meet and talk to, when I ask what is their biggest challenge that they see in their business, more often than not, the most common answer that I get is access to great talent. Because every business is undergoing transformation. Every business is getting disrupted or is a disruptor. And to be able to strategically win, organizations that will have access to talent will be the ones who will be far ahead compared to their competition. And I see Topcoder as providing that talent, 1.4 million technical people available on a screen of a laptop. Wonderful. So it was very exciting for me to see that for real. And I'll tell you a little bit about Wipro and why we feel so excited of having Topcoder as part of the family. Do I need to have this as well? So Wipro's strategy has always been, and that is part of Wipro's DNA, is to be an innovator and help our customers innovate. We've always been very pioneering, very entrepreneurial, and we help our customers be innovative and take innovative products and services to their markets. About 20, 25 years back, we disrupted the IT services, the way they were done, by launching a global delivery model. There's a book written on Wipro about Bangalore Tigers. Some of you might have heard about it. That was essentially globalization of talent, and it was called labor cost arbitrage. It also gave access to a large amount of talent. As I look at today, as organizations are modernizing, especially large enterprises, modernizing their core IT landscape and their business operations, or as they are digitally transforming themselves, innovating their products and services, and as technology is getting into products and services of most enterprises, Wipro is now helping organizations exactly modernize and exactly transform the way they want to do it. And when I look at ourselves as a company, it's very interesting because when enterprises modernize, essentially what they do, they simplify their business processes, they simplify their IT landscape, they take applications and infrastructure to the cloud, they hyper-automate. So technology is always automated stuff, but with robotics and AI and ML, you are able to hyper-automate, actually do stuff that is being done by people today, developers, maintenance engineers, field service engineers, service desk, call centers, all of that gets hyper-automated. And guess what? So you start with elimination, you move it to cloud, hyper-automate, and then what is left is what is done by people. And earlier, it was done in a global delivery model. I believe in the future, it'll get done through some kind of crowdsourcing. And that is the level of disruption our own business, Wipro's own business, is undergoing. And that is why Topcoder is extremely important for us to be a provider of a future to enterprises. And one of the things we always believe at Wipro as we enable our customers to innovate is to eat our own dog food. So Raja Ukil, my CIO, is somewhere here in the room. Raja? Yeah, there he is. And he's going to talk a little later about how Wipro is leveraging crowdsourcing in its own development efforts for its customers and for our own CIO. Today, 1.5% of effort delivered by Wipro for development projects is done through an internal crowdsourcing mechanism that, just for convenience and not to confuse our salespeople, we call it Top Gear. But essentially, it is on the Topcoder platform for internal use, for training, and for delivering engagements. And 1.5% in Wipro terms is about, I'll let you do the math, but Wipro is an $8 billion organization, 170,000 people worldwide, of which about 50% people do fixed price project development, 1.5% of that. And I do believe that within the next year, the team is confident of getting that number to about 10%. I want to congratulate each one of you over here because everybody in this room is either a Topcoder customer, and by show of hands, please raise your hands for people who are already Topcoder customers. Thank you. Or are people who are considering leveraging innovation and crowdsourcing in their organizations. And thank you for being trailblazers in your organization. And I was speaking to Steve from NASA, who's been a customer for 10 years. Steve, thank you. And one of the things I realized is, while everybody gets quite excited about all innovation, in large enterprises like places where most of you belong, and most of Wipro's customers are, the bigger challenge is not about the acceptance of a new way of working or technology. It is about convincing the rest of the organization, the various stakeholders in the organization, in terms of how do you ensure security, how do you ensure intellectual property rights, how do you ensure data privacy, how does work actually get done? In so many of my interactions with chief digital officers, chief innovation officers, chief information officers at enterprises, the conversation is not more, it almost feels to me an AWS here. So thank you for Chandan sponsoring this event. All the conversations I had with technologists and enterprises about 2009 to 2011 timeframe on cloud is the conversation I see happening right now on crowd, which essentially means that if we go with the pattern that every technological disruption gets accelerated as you get new disruptions, maybe in less than 5 years. Like today, every enterprise wants to move the whole hog onto the cloud. I think every enterprise will need to move to crowdsourcing in some shape or form. So congratulations for being in this room, spending half a day for understanding, learning on various technologies and innovative ways of working, including Topcoder and crowdsourcing, because I think each one of you will be charting this course for the future for your organizations, and you'll be the trailblazers. So thank you, and congratulations for being here.
Hey, thanks for making time to come this morning. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much. One more time, a round of applause for Abid. Thank you so much for being here. He took time out of his schedule this morning, had a big customer meeting, moved it back to be here this morning. So I want to bring up the next speaker for this morning. He is the president of Marketing, Innovation, and Technology and the global head of manufacturing and communications for Wipro. Please help me welcome to the stage, Milind Rao. If you need it.
Good morning. Good to see you guys. First of all, again, big thank you to both our sponsors and all our customers. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you in advance for all the prospective customers, because we really expect you to embrace crowdsourcing. And my job today is to talk a little bit about disruption and where I see the pride of place of crowdsourcing in disruption. Now, I joined Wipro about a year ago, and I joined from a very innovative company, which is General Electric. And when we looked at innovation in GE, it was almost a way of life, right? Nowadays, when we talk about innovation, virtually everyone talks about it. Virtually everyone says you got to have innovation. You got to make sure that you're constantly innovating. And I go back and say, when you're saying you need to be constantly innovating, that's more or less like saying you got to do your regular work, right? So is innovation therefore something which is different, or is innovation a way of life? And therefore, what do we need to look at? Do we need to look at constant innovation, or do we need to now start looking at the bigger element of innovation, which is disruption? And I think truly, if you look at models which have emerged out of various industries, whether it's technology, whether it's media, whether it's retail, it is actually disruption which is leading the business models and not the other way around, right? So I thought maybe I'll speak to you a little bit about what I think are the prerequisites of disruption, and how do we make sure that within our organization we can have disruption. And I'd love to give you examples of what we've done both at Wipro as well as what I've done in a few of the organizations before. The first and fundamental thing about disruption is that you need to have a customer perspective, right? It's very important to know your customers or to know your consumers and what is it that they're looking for in the future. It's not enough to say, well, my customers are looking for A, B, and C, and I'm fulfilling those A, B, and C, and my customer satisfaction is 6 points on 7, and how do I take it from 6 points to 6.2? It's important to look at how is it that they're going to be delighted and not satisfied, right? So customer delight, and by the way, I was in an organization which is a telecom company where they said, okay, customer delight is now going to be what we are going to do all the time. Here, the reality is you can't delight a customer all the time, right? Delight, if it happens, constantly becomes satisfaction, right? So the important thing is for us to see what is a mechanism whereby a customer will be delighted to continue service. And more importantly, is the organizational construct made in such a way that you're able to take the customer perspective and put it inside. I'll give you a simple example. We talk a lot about digital transformation. We ourselves, in fact, Raja is a partner of crime in crime with me on this one. We ourselves looked at, we as a company in technology services are looking at providing digital transformation. The big question is, how digital are we ourselves? Right? It's very hard for my salespeople and pre-sales people and customer service people to be telling people that we're going to digitally transform if we ourselves look at things in a very, age-old traditional legacy manner. So we embarked on a project which we call Project Quantum, and quantum really signifying a quantum leap in terms of what we have to do, and said that we will internally make sure that everything within Wipro is digital, and only then can we rightfully go to our customers and say, I'm going to help you do digital transformation. So I think the first point is you've got to know about what will delight the customer and how do you internally keep your organization to be able to deliver that delight to the customer. The second aspect is clearly technology. We talked about innovation at the start, and people used to say innovation can be of multiple types. Innovation is of products, of services, of financial models, of how you deliver, innovation in business models, and so on and so forth. But disruption goes a little bit beyond that. Disruption needs to have technology built into it. It has to be synced along with it. Aaron, talked about it in his initial few remarks about how blockchain or IoT or AI and cybersecurity and all of these technologies are enabling changes in business model, changes which are fairly dramatic. But the question is, as a technology service provider, this is something that I can go and talk to people about, but to what extent am I leveraging the technology to make a disruption? And I think that's very important. Topcoder, by the way, is a great example, and I'm going to come back to that, of how you can truly disrupt using technology. So a lot of times, people say, well, my CTO is talking about new technologies, and we're embarking on a technology journey. But the question I would ask is that your CTO has said that these are the technologies that I'm going to follow. How excited is the business in saying that these technologies are going to change the way that I react to my customer or my consumer, or are giving me a dramatic differentiation versus my competition? So don't look at technology as, again, something that is going to enable. You have to look at technology as something which is going to enable. IT as something which is going to enable your processes. But look at what it is in technology that is going to truly enable me to disrupt, right? So that's the second point. The third point is that disruption is fundamentally about business models, right? It's fundamentally about dramatically changing what we do. I'll give you an example, and this is, I'm sure most of you would have gone through this, People talk about, I'm doing a lot of innovation, I'm doing a lot of automation, and automation is enabling us to bring down our number of people deployed, or the number of, or freeing up people to do more, and so on and so forth. But the question that I ask customers or our clients is, to what extent has automation changed the way that you do business, right? If you used automation to reduce your workforce by 65, 70%, I could call it a disruption. But if you used automation to change your workforce, as an example, or the number of tasks that you do by 10%, that's just betterment, right? So disruption fundamentally has to be around when the business model itself gets questioned. It cannot be by doing incrementality. And therefore, when I look at Wipro and we have our AI platform called Homes, the target that I set for the Homes team is to say, only when the customer comes back and says that you have enabled me to go to market differently, or you have enabled significant cost efficiencies, or you have enabled me to change my business model by moving a lot of people who are doing A to B, can you say that your metrics are green? Otherwise, you cannot say my metrics are green. Otherwise, all you're doing is, running some scripts and, just making sure that, 10 lines, become 4 lines, and, that enables us to save 2 minutes of time per person, and you multiply it by the number of people, and theoretically, you could say I've saved 269 man-years in a big organization, but it really means nothing, right? So what is the disruption of business model? And I just thought, I'd give you a couple of examples to sort of underscore what we're talking about, change of business model. So there's this, brand of coffee makers that we work with in Australia. And they said, well, here's the thing that we want to do. We want to make sure that we use an IoT platform to enable us to know how the coffee machines are doing, and, get back to customers and say, here's the state of your coffee machine. Can we make it better? Proactive service, that's a very important thing. I'm sure a lot of you are looking at it. But when we went and talked to them and said, is that really what you want to do, or do you want to do something more? And through the ideation process, we came back and said, well, you know what? We will create an IoT platform for you. We will create a mechanism for proactive service and repair management for you. But why don't we look at not just looking at the coffee maker in your kitchen, but also looking at all the other devices in your kitchen. So look at your oven, look at your microwave, look at your refrigerator, and all the devices that you have there. Sync them all together, create a smart kitchen for you, and enable the person who's using the kitchen to have everything on a smartphone. So we created a smartphone app for it and enabled them to change all parameters within a kitchen. And on top of that, we built in recipes that, you would want to use, based on what all that you've cooked before in the last 1 week and the last 2 weeks, downloaded the recipes so that they're available on your smartphone, and fundamentally changed the way that you were using your kitchen. Now, we could have theoretically gone and said, well, the definition was, can I make it easier to service my coffee maker? To, I have an ability to rethink what I do in my kitchen, right? So the disruption in business model is something which is very, very important in the way of thinking around the business. Another example is, this is a welding maker in Europe. And they wanted, again, to use platforms to see, how well their welding machines are doing, and they're into industrial welding. And we said, we will work on that, but we also said, let's work on a model whereby we look at how productive are your welding machines? How are people utilizing it? Let's start gathering environmental data and use the analytics to tell you how much a weld will be required over what period of time, and what is going to be the cost of that weld, so that you can go back to your customers and say, I know the cost of the machine, and I know the cost of weld, and I know the cost of repair, and I'm going to bundle it all, and I'm going to stop selling you machines, and I'm going to sell you welding as a service. Right? So now that's a disruption in the business model. And I think, as we work, and this is not just true of us, but, for all our, colleagues in the technology services industry, the importance is to look at how well you can disrupt the business model and not just, change a few things in the business model. The fourth part, I think Abid talked a little bit about it, is of course people. We are clearly in a gig economy. It's changing dramatically. Gartner estimates are that 1/3 of people are currently working in the gig economy, and the expectation is by 2021-22, 50% of all people would be working in the gig economy. Now, that's a massive transformation. Here we talk to our HR departments about how many people we've got in our company and what they're doing for our organization and how we need to motivate them. Suddenly, you got to say, well, you know what? Half my workforce doesn't actually work for me. They work as independent agents. And how do you start looking at things in that kind of scenario? And that's where our investment in Topcoder, I believe, is an incredible one. I think there are 2 or 3 things that we also looked at when we were getting into Topcoder as a service that we wanted to integrate into the fabric of our organization. The first one was, the fundamental change in the economy as it is taking place. And by the way, by 2020, 75% of enterprises are going to be using crowdsourcing in some form or fashion. So for those of you who are not looking at it right now, maybe you don't want to be part of the other 25% by 2020. And importantly, a significant change is happening in the way technologies are being adopted. The traditional cycle of think, initiate, design, productize, et cetera, and then develop and make better is changing. When I was in GE, and this I remember 5-6 years ago, the big thing was MVP, right? I mean, you all heard of MVPs. It was a little new 6 or 7 years ago, and we were talking about minimally viable product, but that has changed to minimally viable process. It's changed to systems. It's changed to services, and we don't talk about MVP so much anymore, right? Because the process, it's a great concept, by the way, no taking away from it. But the speed and scale with which you've got to do MVP is changing dramatically. And I believe that the only way in which you can do that is the thought, the ideation, and the process which crowdsourcing offers you. I'll give you a small example. Wipro has 170,000 people. When we acquired Topcoder less than 2 years ago, the total community on Topcoder was 1.1 million people, right? That's approximately 6 times the size of Wipro. Now, theoretically, we can do a lot with 170,000 people, but you can do a lot with 6 times the number of people. Today, the number of people on Topcoder is nearly 1.4 million, right? So we've added between 250 to 300,000 people in the last 2 years on the platform. And for a large company like Wipro, and we're proud to say that we have 170,000 people, but the reality is we added 1.5 times the number of total strength of Wipro on the crowdsourcing platform in less than 2 years. And so when you think about agility, when you think about the ability to serve a customer, I was with a customer recently with a bank, and the bank said, listen, we are redoing our mobile app and we needed a new interface and we'd like to try Topcoder, right? So we said, okay, would you like a design? They said, yeah, ideally if you could give us 2 designs, that'll be great. And they gave us a month to do it. We went back to the bank in 1 week with 5 different designs. And they had to choose, what they had to do. Now, And we said, by the way, it doesn't cost more than what it would cost you if you had put the whole thing together. So the speed, the agility, the ability to pivot the business model, as well as the ability to change, and all of the things that I talked about in disruption is something which is available through hybrid crowdsourcing and through Topcoder. We're constantly looking at how we can make Topcoder better, bigger, look at more services around Topcoder. We thought about quality as a service. We're coming up with many more things which we'll talk about during the course of the day. But I believe, and I look at technology, all of technology and innovation at Wipro, but if there's one star in that technology and innovation space in Wipro, believe me, it is Topcoder. I'm completely convinced about it. I'm so thrilled to be here. I thank you all for being here. And thank you for all the people who've considered Topcoder as a partner, and for those who are considering it. Thanks very much. Great to be here. Thank you.
Milind, thank you. Thank you so much. Very insightful. Lots of knowledge there. It's always great to hear from you. So we're tracking well with schedule, and I want to take this opportunity to bring up our next speaker, who is the presenting sponsor. We wouldn't have been able to have this event without them. Please help me welcome the Director of Worldwide Enterprise and Industry Vertical Businesses at AWS, Chandran Sharma.
Thank you. Good morning. So, unpacking innovation on AWS. That's the presentation for the next 30 minutes or so. I'm going to talk or break my presentation into sort of two parts. So if you think about Amazon, Amazon is a really large customer of AWS. Like many of you in this room, they keep us on our toes. They tell us when we slip up. They're very demanding, and arguably one of the more innovative companies in the enterprise space. So unpacking Amazon's culture of innovation and take you through how we think about system of innovation in Amazon. And then the second part is, we have thousands and thousands of enterprises running businesses on AWS. The patterns we have seen over the years that drive speed and innovation in their business, okay? So Amazon had its, as you know, humble beginnings as a bookstore on the web. And it had the aspiration to be world's largest bookstore over a period of time. Now, since the company started about 20 plus years ago, it has pioneered e-commerce. It has pioneered adjacencies in e-commerce over time. Different businesses that you could argue or seemingly look very different from e-commerce, and underlying. And then I think over time, Amazon has become good at, and perhaps really good at, taking hard problems and solving them in a way to drive mass adoption, or as the previous speaker said, disruption in different spaces. So examples of Kindle or Alexa, Amazon Web Services, or more recently, Amazon Go, the retail experience. So what underlies this ability to innovate quickly and seemingly disparate spaces? So let me start with, I think it's appropriate to start with Jeff, our CEO and founder. We at Amazon believe in innovation, or more appropriately, invention, that enables others, consumers, small businesses, medium businesses, large enterprises, to drive, unleash their own creativity and their ability and speed to innovate and bring new ideas to market. So that's sort of the kind of innovation we gravitate to. And where does this innovation begin for us? For us, you may have heard the term customer obsession, right? That's one of our core values or principles at Amazon. It always starts from customer and you work backwards. There are lots of business models. There is a customer-led business model, product-led business models, competitor-led business models. For us, the customer-led business model works the best because customers are always dissatisfied. You in the audience are always dissatisfied. Even when the times are good, customers are always dissatisfied. They will always challenge you to do better, right? And where do you anchor this innovation? And by the way, you may have heard this before, Amazon's flywheel. This is what ties seemingly disparate businesses at times together that you saw on one of the previous charts. We typically think of innovation or anchoring innovation in three areas. We believe that customers, consumers, small businesses, large enterprises of all types, customers of all types, would require value, selection or choice, and convenience. And they would require this today. They will require this 10 years from today. They'll require this 50 years from today. So if you can continue to innovate across those three dimensions, and you do it in a way that they reinforce each other, you can create a flywheel for any type of business, regardless of the business you're actually running. So that's sort of our governing philosophy. So what underpins, or the tenets or the principles that underpin our culture of innovation at Amazon? Customer obsession. Start with customer and work back. Long-term thinking. You have to be really sure about why you are looking to do something. Although how you do it, what you do might actually vary over time. An inventive mindset that is okay with failure. And then willing to be misunderstood. If you try new things, you will be wrong, you will be misunderstood. Amazon Web Services is AWS is a great example of that. If you knew when it was launched in 2006, Business Week came out with something, Amazon should stick to its knitting. Why are you trying to launch a technology business? And then if you just fast forward 10 years, same Business Week and institutions in the Wall Street, when we started to announce our results publicly for AWS, they loved the business, right? But that was a 10-year, long period of time, people completely misunderstood what Amazon was trying to do. So what is the underlying system of innovation, or how do you organize for innovations? For us, these are sort of four aspects: mechanisms, architecture, culture, and organization, which I will touch briefly as I fly through. If you can address these aspects, you can arguably take what in most organizations is typically a central function, an innovation team or an R&D team, and you can take it from the center and move it to the edge in your organization, meaning you make it really pervasive across your organization. So a mechanism, an example for us would be any product and service or an idea we launch in Amazon goes through this process. We first write the press release. What would we say when we launch that offering to the customers, to the market? Right? What is the value proposition? What is the experience? You write the press release. You write frequently asked questions. The questions the customers would ask you, the stakeholders would ask you, the market would ask you, internally about the business around that product or service, the financials. And by the way, everybody in Amazon knows if you have an idea, this is what you do. You write it, you socialize it, you get feedback, and you continue to do it. So it's highly pervasive mechanism, and everybody knows how you move your idea forward, right? At the same time, this is a great mechanism to iterate, because when you write something down, you will know whether it's compelling, right? So if it's not compelling, you go back, you continue your research around customer needs, customer validation. And it's not uncommon for you to do this for months on end. I've been involved in projects where we have spent time on press release and a frequently asked question, PRFAQ for short, for 6 to 9 months. And the actual product development was, less than 2 months. Because we wanted to be sure why we were doing this. And for us, to quote Jeff again, most organizations will develop the product, then give it to marketing to figure out what the message would be. For us, we believe that's sort of backwards. You should really be very sure why you're trying to do this before you invest time and energy into it. So that's an example of a mechanism. Architecture. Structure that supports rapid change and speed. We are firm believers in self-service platforms. No intermediaries, right? If you need access to resources, you're a builder, you're an innovator, you should have it at low cost, if you will. And generally this applies to technology, but it could apply to HR, it could apply to financial services, it could apply to almost anything you do. Remove gatekeepers. Most organizations, large enterprises particularly, have monolithic systems. And by the way, Amazon was no different. Early 2000, if you looked at our web property, our retail site, this is sort of what it looked. It was a big, large, monolithic application where our category leads, they were trying to launch new categories, new products, new features and functions, and they were getting constrained in the throughput they could drive through that monolithic application or architecture. And this is what happens. You have your most precious resources, your developers, your builders in your organization. They are looking for time slices to get changes, new products, features, and enhancements into production, bottlenecked through regression testing, integration testing, and it reduces to a single delivery pipeline. So your ability, and there is a lot of time wasted just waiting. If you imagine the percentage of time they're actually being productive, writing productive code, relative to the time it takes to really get it to the delivery, is really unbelievable, right? So the alternate view to this would be a structure where you take your large applications and, for simplicity, break them down into smaller micro applications. You don't want to do this for every application, just critical applications where you need throughput and speed. If you did that, if you go to retail website today, for example, for Amazon, it comes to life with hundreds and thousands of micro applications or microservices that come together at that point in time to render the experience for you. And the idea being, when you break applications into smaller chunks, which are single purpose, which are accessible only through standard APIs, which means you reduce the dependencies upstream and downstream. And you allow each of that single purpose application to constantly innovate as long as they are not changing how they are interacting with the rest of the services or applications. It drives tremendous throughput into the pipeline. It looks like this from the previous one. Each micro application or microservice is an independent delivery pipeline that is constantly driving throughput and change into your production environment. In typical large enterprise, you may have a major release every month, a minor release every month. This is changes into production environment, a number of changes every second in the Amazon environment, right? So for critical applications, architecture and a structure plays a critical role, your speed and innovation. How do we, culture, critical part. Add to mechanisms, architecture, culture. Starts with obviously people who are part of your organization, the values you espouse. We hire builders and we let them build. We give them the freedom through self-service platforms to experiment. Early, we drive the cost of failure, cost of experimentation down to zero, which is what you would do or can do when you use Amazon Web Services cloud platform. The other sort of concept we have as part of our culture is one-way doors versus two-way doors. What I mean by that is if you make a decision, you walk through a door, but you can reverse yourself without too much cost or effort, it's a two-way door. One-way door is if you made a decision and it's really hard or costly for you to unwind it. And we believe vast majority, 95% plus decisions in any organization are two-way doors. And most organizations spend inordinate amount of time deciding on two-way doors, which they could easily delegate to their frontline employees, as long as they reduce the cost of experimentation and innovation or failure to zero. So if you give your frontline employees the ability to innovate, the cost of experimentation is zero, you can create two-way doors in your organization for most decisions, which drives throughput, drives empowerment at the front line. And then you reserve true one-way door decisions that require escalation to upper management, that requires bandwidth and energy of your executive team. And it's reverse. Our executive team spends inordinate amount of time on one-way door decisions, which are far fewer. Most of the two-way door decisions are delegated down to the organization. So you can drive throughput and speed and empowerment in the organization. So that's an interesting and a decent mental model to consider. The other piece of the culture you have to grapple when you talk about innovation is willingness to tolerate failure. If you literally knew the outcome in advance, it's not an experiment. Experiment will either succeed or fail. You need to reduce the cost of experimentation to zero or really low. But you have to accept failures. This is an example of, we invested a lot in Fire Phone at one point in time, and it was a failure. It was a spectacular failure. And Jeff was in our investment community, and he was asked this question: can you assure us that, I'm paraphrasing, that there are no bigger failures than Fire Phone in store in the future in Amazon? And if you know Jeff, he sort of sat back and laughed and said, you know what, there are likely bigger failures than Fire Phone, which I don't know about, right? So if you see your executive team publicly endorsing it's okay to fail, it gives tremendous confidence for people in the organization to innovate. Now, you don't necessarily have to do it with the investment community, just public platforms. You as executives of your organizations create an environment that it's okay to fail, as long as you reduce the cost of failure to really low in your organizations. And the team that invested time in Fire Phone, they went on to do great things. Alexa came out of that effort, by the way, as an example, right? A lot of things that in Alexa, we learned from those mistakes, and you built a new offering. So that's really, really powerful. And this is one of the harder things to do for most organizations, which generally are looking to avoid failure. I think you should focus on reducing the cost of failure to as low as possible, but really be okay with failing. And lastly, organization. We are big fans of, we say that if you can't feed a team on 2 pizzas, the team is too large, right? So you saw in the architecture example, I said break large monoliths into micro applications. You pair these micro applications with these autonomous, independent teams who are really responsible for constantly innovating around that service and application. They own it end to end. This team has technology. There is no distinction between business and technology. It's that team that has the resources to take that service or micro application and constantly innovate around that. So there is a team, for example, who is probably thinking, who is waking up every day and thinking through, how do I improve customer feedback service on Amazon's retail website? There's a team that's focused on, how you do exposed pricing, how you look at inventory lookup. So you can think of breaking the functionality into micro applications, pairing with the teams that wake up, and their metrics are not necessarily that I am in technology, so I need to show how quickly I can develop or throughput on development. They are responsible for end business outcomes, technology and business autonomous teams. So that creates, so the change becomes a product versus a project. Most organizations, change is a project. Previous speaker spoke about constant change. This is how you drive constant change, because you make change a product versus a project. Okay, now that was a quick fly through how Amazon, one of the largest customers of AWS, thinks about innovation. And clearly, AWS plays a great role in supporting and enabling that really large business with architecture and underlying tools that drive cost of experimentation, cost of scaling, and failure to zero. Our other customers, thousands and thousands of other customers, by the way, every company, every enterprise has innovation in their DNA. If you think about Ford Motor Company, or let me step back. Every enterprise at some point pioneered an innovation that allowed them to grow and scale and be what they are today, if you reflect back on the history. So if you look at Ford, they took moving assembly line and took the time it took to assemble cars from over 12 hours down to less than 2 hours. Or you think of General Electric and Thomas Edison, or you think about AT&T or Alexander Graham Bell. All large enterprises have pioneered innovation at some point in their career or in their journey. So they have the innovation DNA. All enterprises have a lot of advantages. Existing customers, deep knowledge of markets, skilled employees, tenured employees, a lot of financial resources, existing brand equity, controls, compliance processes. So a lot of inherent advantages with certainly an innovation DNA that pioneered things in the past. What's the challenge? The challenge is to lever all those strengths, but unblock the ability to move at speed and innovation. And if you really agree with the premise sort of I've spoken about so far, it's the speed I will anchor with. Nobody knows what will succeed in the market. It's your ability to experiment quickly, learn from it, iterate. It's all about speed in the business. Innovation is a function of speed and your ability to move fast, iterate, and reduce cost of experimentation to zero. There's no magic to it. It's ability to try a lot of things and figure out what succeeds quickly at a low cost. Right? So speed is really critical. That's the anchoring word when you think about innovation. How I drive velocity in the organization. But you know what? This requires change. Change is hard. You have established processes, culture, existing infrastructure for large enterprises. And when you talk about change, it's not just a technology challenge. It's an organizational challenge. It's enabled by technology. But you have to think bigger than just technology if you're thinking about innovation and speed. So what we have learned as patterns from successful enterprises, thousands of enterprises that are innovating on AWS. First, adopt a modern technology platform. Platform that allows you to take what are arguably one-way doors in many organizations around technology investments to two-way doors. That allows you to reduce the cost of experimentation and failure down to zero. Move to the cloud, lift and shift. Vast majority of applications in an enterprise environment could be lifted and shifted to the cloud. You'll get immediate benefits on cost, resiliency, that you can channel back into more strategic aspects of your business. Jumpstart modernization around your development practices. Modernize key strategic applications to drive high throughput and velocity. Change them from monolithic architectures to more agile architectures. You don't have to do it for a vast majority of your environment. Just do it for the ones that really matter for you, because it takes investment to do it. And by the way, adopt modern platform at scale. Don't 10, 20% of your environment running on cloud. It clearly will drive you benefits, but it's not enough to fundamentally change the arc of your ability to move at speed and reduce and enabling associates and builders in your organization to move quickly and experiment at low cost and reduce cost of failure to zero. Adopt at scale. When you do that, it changes your organization's ability. Couple more adoption of modern technology platform to how would you organize for speed? Agile and lean practices, 2 pizza teams, smaller teams. I discussed products versus projects, especially the more critical parts of your business that really differentiate you in the market. Adopt a continuous change mindset versus a project-based change mindset. Those independent teams driving constant innovation across a small unit of work which they fully own and can drive change. And drive insights and cloud scale analytics down to your front lines that makes for rapid decisioning in your business. So organize for speed. So couple modern platform, organizing for speed with, especially as executives, you have a pretty wide blast radius and footprint. Drive change in your culture where it's needed. Working back from customers, reducing the cost of trying new ideas, testing hypotheses, removing impediments, telling people it's okay to be failure, it's okay to fail, celebrating failure, celebrating what you learn from it, right? Now, there's a good example here where sometimes when you do this, it doesn't necessarily mean you make the same mistake twice and call it an experiment. Like, that's just a defect, right? So experiment is when you do something new and you learn from it. But if you repeat the same mistake again, even in Amazon, we have to tell people that's not an experiment anymore. That's just a defect. And you have to couple experimentation with operational excellence, right? You have to do both as you learn and go. Now, while doing all of this, you still have to make sure security, compliance, we are in a digital world, data, critical data, important data, sensitive data, private data, it is still the job zero, right? At AWS, if you hear Andy Jassy, our CEO, he will tell you security, compliance is job zero. And this is true for most, if not all, enterprises. The good news is, as you adopt modern technology platforms, there is now enough evidence and public endorsement that adoption of modern platforms like AWS makes you more secure. Rob Alexander, Capital One CIO, on record, FINRA, regulatory agencies, government agencies, because it gives you transparency, auditability that you just do not necessarily get in legacy or on-prem environments. So not only you will get a modern platform that drives speed and your ability to change quickly and innovate quickly, it will also improve your security posture, resiliency posture, your ability to do better recovery across wider footprint of applications at lower cost. So it actually is a pretty strong multiplier impact across your business. So if you're looking to drive change, transformation in your business, focused on innovation, and I would add innovation and speed in the same breath, modern technology platform, organizing for speed, creating a culture that's okay to fail, and then creating a secure, compliant environment that allows you to do all of those things while protecting the crown jewels of your business, your customers, and the like. It's probably appropriate to end with a quote from Jeff. So he said, you can boil down the success Amazon had so far on three things: customer first, invent or innovate, and then take a longer term view, right? So if you work with AWS and Amazon, you would find that we have a very different engagement with you as a technology provider than other legacy providers in the technology space. Take a long-term view, okay? With that, thank you very much. I hope this was useful.
Once again, round of applause for Shannon. Excellent presentation. I was listening to what he said, and I love that last slide about putting the customer first, being innovative and be patient. And I tie that back to what he said earlier about failing fast. And at Topcoder, we can definitely relate to that. Those three things of putting our customers first, that's what we always try to do. We want to definitely be innovative, and we think crowdsourcing is that way that we're doing that. And being patient and waiting. We've been around for 17 years. And I can say that, with the acquisition from Wipro, these last few years, we were really hitting our stride. So it was great to hear that, and also being able to fail fast and knowing how to recover from those results. So next up, we had the opportunity to work with the CIO from Wipro, Raja, great friend, love him. He's been one of the biggest supporters of us, and our head of mobile app dev to really get crowdsourcing going internally. And we were able to build the MyWipro platform that's used by all 180,000 employees of Wipro. So a very overwhelming task when we got it brought to us, but the results have been fantastic and impeccable. So please help me welcome to the stage the Senior Vice President and CIO at Wipro, Raja Ukul, and the head of mobile app dev from Topcoder, Rashad Sial.
Good man. Good morning.
All right. Thank you.
I think we are standing between the break. Right?
All right, let's get started.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. All right, so please tell me a little about yourself and your role at Wipro.
I'm the CIO at Wipro. I've been around for as long as Topcoder has been in existence, so almost 17 years. 5 years in this role, love technology and love change. I wish to change everything every day. That doesn't happen always.
Excellent, thank you. What are the most important decisions you make as a leader?
Two things, actually, interesting question, actually. Two things which I have to grapple with every day. One is whenever we are doing a project, I ask myself, what does it mean for the user? If the answer is, it means nothing, we would drop the project, right? So when I got started till date, I think the project mix has changed. Earlier, we would take orders and do things which were, meant nothing for the end users. So I'm very passionate about what users go through on a daily basis. So that's one big decision I have to take. And the second thing is, as you heard the earlier speakers, transformation is all about also putting the core right, the architecture, etc. So what worries me is, am I putting in a piece of technology which becomes redundant in 1 year time frame, right? That keeps me awake, because sometimes the solutions are not evolved. You bet on the future and you expect that things will integrate and it will fall in place, and will last the test of time. So that, to my mind, is a big challenge.
Great, thank you. What's the biggest risk you've taken so far?
We change, there's a joke which my team has around me about how I do change management. It seems I do change and then the management happens on its own, but, that's not necessarily true. But we have done, we take risks all the time, right? We take risks with our ERP system. We upgraded to HANA at a time when our financial results were, due in 45 days, and if things went wrong and we had to roll back, and so we take those kind of risks because we didn't find any other window to do it, right?
How did it go?
It went well. We had users screaming from the rooftop for 2 days because performance was not all right, and after that we stabilized, right? So it was okay.
Good. All right. To date, how's your experience been with Topcoder? I'm asking the tough questions.
Yeah, I know. And you never told me all these questions beforehand. So, right. Topcoder has been fun. But I met Mike Morris, very initially into, when we acquired Topcoder, and I was thrilled with what he had to say, right? When this was clearly a new way of working, it opened up so much possibilities. But as I went back to my team, I didn't imagine that they would not be as thrilled as I was, right? So initially there was a lot of resistance. Some of you might be experienced in outsourcing in its initial days. It was almost the same, right? They thought that something was getting imposed upon them, and they were not owning up. So people fail to notice, it's not invented here syndrome. That's how I would describe it. But we started with a phase where, we took innovation as a theme.
Yeah.
We didn't worry about cost savings. We didn't worry about timeline, skill sets, etc. We just took innovation and we experimented with a few projects. The results were outstanding and they were everybody to see, right? And that's when the team started getting on board. Right now, we have passed that phase. It has become mainstream delivery mechanism for us. We are around 5% of the app dev work in my team gets done through Topcoder, right? Crowdsourcing as a whole. And that is fabulous, right? It integrates with our timeline, and honestly, it's been a new learning for everybody, right? You get to learn a lot of things as an IT organization, right? How things can be looked differently. Aaron spoke about MyWipro, right? It's a single portal for all Wipro, right? It's 180,000 people use that, right? And this was delivered in 3 weeks. The design challenge, in 3 weeks, we got around 10 submissions. We could have never done that in the history of our organization. And remember, I come from an organization which is more IT than outside my team, right? So it was fascinating. I love the experience.
What were some of the initial reactions from your team in regards to the designs that they had received?
So, as I told you, initial there was a resistance saying that, do you want to say we don't do the job right? Are we not good at it? Is somebody better? Till we made them understand that this is part of your work. You're just getting an external, another fulfillment channel to help you deliver your work better and, try out innovation. And initially they failed to, they missed the point that, it cannot be a one-way street. You post a challenge and then you're done with it. You have to work in breaking down the work. You have to work in evaluating the options which come back, and then you have to work with a winner to make it contextual to the organization, right? That part came in slowly, and which is when it started becoming mainstream.
So there was some initial resistance to working with an outside team. How did your team adopt crowdsourcing? What were some of the issues that tended to pop up?
So I talked about the culture thing. There were, just to set the context of, the number of changes which we do in our environment. It's roughly around 30 projects, large projects in a quarter, which is 3 months. We do around 1,500 enhancement requests, right? Means you can ask me, why do we change so much? And that's not, you could have probably asked my CEO. We are going through a transformation ourselves. So, every day is change, every day is automation, every day is all about user experience. So naturally, you don't have A, that bandwidth, B, you do not have the skill sets available, when you need it. So, and therefore, it came as a blessing in disguise, right?
Yeah.
This option which opened up for us. All we had to do was learn how to break down work. So I'm very happy to let you know I have 30 people in my team who are certified Topcoder challenge architects, right? So they can break down the work themselves, right? So they don't need to go to an external challenge architect to get the job done. So
You're gonna put me out of a job.
yes. No. So you can see here, this is my Wipro. Okay, this is the wireframes initial which came back from Topcoder, and if you're interested during the coffee break, I can open up production and show you. It just looks similar, right? And it's used by 180,000 people. It's very, very personalized to the role. It has a lot of cool features. The AI engine is just getting integrated as we speak. In the next 2 weeks, there will be a virtual assistant on top of this. And it's a single window for all of Wipro, for everybody.
Excellent. So we've done to date over 30 projects for your team, 80 plus UI designs, and over 900 screens that we've developed. Can you tell me a little bit about the work besides the portal design that we've?
Yeah, so broadly, if I segregate the kind of work we are doing with the crowd, obviously, the easiest one which we got started early was design. Right, I don't see Adam here, my good friend, right? He has been a great help. He is the design lead at Topcoder, right? So we work very closely. So that was initial. Then we went into core development. Obviously, if you are from IT and from an IT organization, you will know that the biggest challenge which is there is that we don't have a microservices-based architecture, or historically IT organizations did not have. So services were not exposed securely, which we had done as a foundation change. So what has happened now is we can do core development of an application through the crowd as well. So that's the second thing which we took up, obviously including front-end development of HTML, JavaScripting, and the API services, etc. And mobile app, Rashid has been a great friend in that. We have the mobile app from Topcoder as well. We have something called an events, which we use all over Wipro. And then the easiest thing to do was testing, right? Automated testing, etc. So generally across all areas. The one example, of course, I know many of you have tried doing this before. I think the experimentation we still do is components, which we otherwise cannot solve it internally. In our industry, people fly to all different countries around the world, and always, right? So they require two things. They require what is called a passport, and they require a visa, right? So Wipro applies visas for every employee, right? And we had a big challenge with that department because they would get the passports back and they had to manually fill in all the visa information, right, into the system. And let me tell you, it was a huge cycle time issue. The team was very big until we posted this challenge to the crowd and they came out with an OCR. Now worldwide, every passport and visa, it can scan the barcode and automatically fill in. And that team is only some 2 or 3 to handle exceptions. So, small things like this. And I remember this challenge came out in under 4 weeks, right? Completely done. Data science is something which we have started working with the crowd. And this was very exciting. This is an Indian passport, by the way. You can do it on any passport, actually.
Great, thank you. So we're going to pause there really quick. Any questions for Raja? Brian, you were raising your hand.
Yes, please.
Sure.
Tim there? Yeah. I think he raised his hands first, so then we'll take yours.
So on your employee experience portal project, so Tim Wyman for Only Myself,
Yeah.
what was the heavy lifting behind the scenes to get it to look and operate that way?
So we had a journey, Tim. This what you saw here is what is in production now. So we had an earlier version. So we had all our applications with REST APIs, etc., already exposed. The change which we did in this version, we created personas. So right now, as we speak, we have some 26 personas defined for the organization. So we had to write a lot more services for this version. Secondly, what we have done is we have provided information widgets from our analytics embedded into MyWipro. So that's also very role contextual. So if a salesperson logs in, he will probably see his opportunities and the orders he has to close, etc. Whereas a person in a project delivery would see, how is this project going, etc., things like that. So end to end, we deployed this and started rolling out in roughly around 6 months. So 3 weeks to get the initial design challenge results back. We took another 3 to 4 weeks to finalize the design. We actually put it out to vote on our Yammer platform to the employees because this was all meant for employees. So there were, I think the final shortlist had 4 designs and employees voted this one. And then we started working with the winner to finalize this. So, 6 months to convert large, and you are aware of, you have seen this, was super quick, I think, right, means.
I have a question on when you say design challenge, and you said like some 10 or 15 were submitted, a large number. Mm-hmm. Then in those scenarios, how do you manage the IP once you pick one, that other designs they were still implemented to solve your business problem? So how do you maintain that?
So anything, and Rashid, you can help me with the answer here, but anything on the crowd which we give out as a challenge, the IP is inherently ours, or for any customer who gives out the challenge, right? Anybody who is in the platform, I'm also registered on the platform, by the way. I have never taken up a challenge, but you breach the terms of IP if you take that design and take it to another customer. That's my understanding. Rashid, you want to add something?
Yeah, any work product that is developed during the course of a challenge on behalf of a client is still confidential and proprietary, and it cannot be reused or shared externally of the challenge, even if that member does not win the challenge. So IP is still protected. For most of our challenges, we do require a non-disclosure agreement, but it depends on the client. Sometimes the client wants to have the code or work product be open source, in which case we wouldn't require an NDA. That was a great question. Looks like we've got another question over. All right.
Yeah, there's one at the end. Yeah.
So the question is, why still there is a resistance to adoption of crowd?
Right now, it is much lesser. As I told you, it's more about, it's a kingdom or a fiefdom question. I have, 100 people reporting into me. I write their appraisals, and very soon you get to see, you're outsourcing work on a platform and you don't know who is developing for you. That's a mindset change, right? And it's a question of ownership. If I take ownership of a work packet or a deliverable, then the behavior which will which will come out is essentially going to be different, right? As opposed to somebody saying, why don't you do a little bit of crowdsourcing? So it has taken us time. Are we there 100% in terms of the behavioral change management? No. But as we see success, what happens is, the users for whom we roll this out, when they appreciate the work, right, for example, Tim likes MyWipro. I can tell it on his behalf, right? He's a good friend for many years, right? And he has seen what we have in Wipro, right? So when Tim says it's a fabulous thing, and it goes back to the owner, the designer from within Wipro, And he or she feels proud that, that's such a wonderful feedback. And I think then all falls into place, right? Means, I hope I've been able to answer your question.
Thank you.
Yes,
VP.
please.
Hi, this is Daniel from Blue Cross Blue Shield. So with the challenges that you've created, I'm sure you've had some failed challenges. What have you learned on those failed challenges to make sure the next challenge was successful?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. We have failed in around 10% of the challenges, right? For example, we had a challenge which was incredibly hard for anybody to crack. We were trying to take surveillance camera output and do a frame-by-frame analysis in real time, do facial recognition, and issue an intrusion alert right on our physical campuses. This, even Homeland Security has not been able to crack, right? So we tried something like this. We could get some components up and running. But it did not go through. We didn't get the results, right? This happens sometimes in, machine learning and advanced AI. So, not that the requirement has gone away. We have just said, it's too ambitious right now. Let's put a workaround and let's move ahead. I don't think we have had a challenge where we have not been able to define a problem statement. That has never been the case. We have been able to define a problem statement and then take it. Sometimes the technology doesn't allow that level of maturity which you expect. So those are the ones where we have failed mostly. And we are happy that we have failed. It's not that, we at least know what is the baseline, current baseline, because these are the best minds in the world, right, who have attempted this. Maybe we'll take a shot at it after a year or so, right, once again. Yes, please.
After we've rolled out a challenge and selected the teams who will work on it from top coder, how have we organized it internally in your team to orchestrate it and run it as a program, point one?
Yeah.
And point two, are there any specific ways of working which we've learned over our experience help us deliver results better?
So, very good question, Amit, actually. So what happens is when you put a project plan in place, if you are, if you are planning to work out some portions of the work through the crowd, and remember that the number of challenges is not fixed. It actually depends on the co-pilot and the challenge architect mostly to break down. So you integrate that as part of the project plan, but mostly in terms of timelines, right? And when you will get the deliverables and what are the dependencies, etc. So once, the initial submissions happen, I think after that, it's a combination, you start working, you declare the winner and you start working with the winner to, to put it into a final shape, which can then go into development. So I'm talking about design, or you can take development, etc. What happens then is the mode of communication usually is like a Slack or equivalent, and the people get into calls, and that is when you provide the additional context, because breaking down in the document may not be enough for getting that full context, and that is when you give the context. And when it comes back, then it gets into the regular, agile mode of delivery, which we follow. If it is more downstream, obviously you take that and put it to crowd. So it's almost similar. The only challenge today we face is when we define a project of crowdsourcing in our SAP system, there is very limited support of how to define that actually phase and work execution. But otherwise, mind you, it's more interaction. Definitely more interaction than what would you have with your own team who has been working with you for 10, 15 years, because they know the context and they would have, if you mention something, they would know this is the technology architecture, this is the standard, etc. So it also depends. As you start working, I think, you do 15, 20 projects with a community. There are a set of people who start working with your organization, right? This is what I've seen. It's not naturally designed, but that's how it comes in, because these guys then know your development standards, they know your design standards, they know a little bit of context of the organization. So you get better at delivery progressively as the challenges go on. So that's another experience which I think is very useful. And today, even though we have not tried it internally, we are going to start. You can actually get named resources on the crowd as well, right? Means that's the latest offering. I think it's 3 months old or something like that. Yeah, contract as a service. So, but I would suggest, you can try all models and it just works.
Great question. Thank you.
Okay, so we have last few minutes. If there are other questions, we'd be happy to answer. Yeah, please.
Sorry, Mike first. So the question is...
Where is the question coming?
Yeah, here.
Oh, okay.
Question is about security and enforcing any legal framework there is in crowdsourcing. So I believe that users or the participants are liable for maintaining the contracts. However, how do you enforce it? How do we assure our customers that this doesn't pose additional threat in their infrastructure?
So, first and foremost, I think we need to understand that there are a few instances where we have got a complete app developed through the crowd. But in most cases, you're breaking down the work, right, and giving out pieces of it to the crowd. So we need to understand that based on that, nobody can assemble the rest of the use case, right? Means it's not possible, right? Means if you break down a design challenge like MyWipro, you can take that design, but it's impossible to put it into another organization because it's very, very Wipro contextual, right? Means so one, we need to understand that how you break down what to crowdsource, what not to crowdsource is very important, right? If you have very sensitive an application with very sensitive information, which is your, say, quarterly results, which you report to the street, I don't think, one should go and crowdsource application development of that, right? Means so, you pick your areas and then you crowdsource. It's obviously like I do, I have a certain goal in mind, by the end of next year, around this time, I want to see 20% of the dev work getting done, app development work through the crowd. That's the goal which we are internally pursuing. We are 15% off. So that's one. Second thing is, by crowdsourcing pieces of the work, when you get back, you're actually required to do all of the security checks, right? Vulnerability assessment, a risk assessment, right? You name it, right? So things like SQL injection or, you're supposed to check all of that. And I'm sure compliance teams in every organization does it. Rashid can say that we work with a lot of customers actually, right? So I have never heard this.
That's a great question. So we run our code through Checkmarks, which is a source code analysis tool, and it checks for any vulnerabilities. We'll also use Zeta Attack Proxy. Both services check against OWASP top 10 for vulnerabilities and security issues.
Okay, we just about have time for one question. No,
we're out of okay. So I have one question.
Yeah.
As a final takeaway, where do you see Topcoder in 5 years?
No, I've never been good at prediction, but I think what will happen if it is already not true, Topcoder will probably become the biggest payroll processor in the world, right? That's what I think. 5 years is too long. I think it will happen before that. With the scarcity of talent, and that's real, right? Technology is changing every day. You will need expertise coming from, externally, right? And I know I come from an industry who does services for our customers, but even us, the time it takes for us to build up a competency, etc. I think it will become even more pervasive across industries. I know financial services, banks, etc., who are experimenting with Topcoder a lot, right? It will become much more mainstream, right? And that's what I see. I'm very excited about it, the prospect. And I hope to come back every year and see a huge amount of progress happening. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Should we click up? Thanks. Thank you again, Raj and Raja. Great job explaining that. And as you can see with the project that we did for Wipro, with the My Wipro, 180,000 users worldwide. So if you're thinking about a project that you want to get started with crowdsourcing, obviously we can go very big, fast, or we can start off with something small, but hopefully it's the former. So we're going to take a bathroom break and a coffee break. And if you are a panelist for the luncheon, on the panel after luncheon, we were going to have you meet. We're not going to do that. But everyone, take a break, gather your things. They're going to refresh the rooms so lunch can be prepared after we come in. But go ahead, head out and get some coffee and refresh yourselves, and we'll be back in 15 minutes. Thanks.
Okay. You just do like a countdown from 10? Yep. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Check 1.